the interim champion or whatever. I think it was something like that. Um, I don't think saying you're the interim champion works. Um, yeah, but that's like that story that you had with Moose and him being the real TNA champion or whatever, or being the TNA champion. You could have done that, but done it in a more legitimate way, sort of. I don't know. Um, yeah. I don't know, because it does become like you start saying, well, uh, then Mike Santana should be that person. Maybe. I don't know. Because it's like, you know, he's the one that's going to win the belt at the end. Maybe they didn't know that, but like that was like what happened. I think there was. I think this is probably why like the plans were so like conflicted at that time, because I think that they still thought perhaps that Joe would still be in TNA, or that he'd be in TNA for a bit longer, or whatever, um, or that he would be more reliably in TNA, or whatever. So I think that they were like, we're going to put the belt back on um, on him initially, perhaps, but then they were like, oh, well, no, that's not what's going to happen. You know, they figured that out, and they knew how over Santana was, and they, like, I don't know, like, this is just me spitballing and speculating, you know, I don't know. Um, but again, you get to that point and say, oh shit, he's not staying, or he's got WWE dates and he's not going to really be here, and all this other stuff. So, okay, we can't put the belt on him. Well, our next biggest guy is Santana. So we need to build to Santana winning this belt, and we can't have him win it yet, but we need to put him in a position where it feels like he can win, and then in 6 more months he will win, or whatever it is. Which maybe you shouldn't have done. Maybe you should have been like, oh, let's just put the belt onto him and go a different way and do other things and do it differently. But, like, I don't know. I think that then Macklin's title would be even less valued in some ways, because it's like, well, now he's, you know, like, even though he wasn't really doing a whole lot, it was like, at least like for a little while there, you felt like, oh, he's our guy now. He's the guy now, kind of thing. He's the frontline man. He's the top dog, kind of thing, at least of his division or whatever else it is, you know. And the Hardys, the tag team, and Leon the X Division. So, you know, like, again, I don't know, but again, like, you start saying, well, that would be lesser than, you know, like, it's already lesser than. But when it's like, oh, we don't have a world title for a little while, or something like that, oh, okay, well, now we have this other title. It's better to be like, have this other title that we now are going to push up into the more main event scene, that means more now, because we don't have another title or whatever else it is. So now this is going to be a main event title kind of thing, while that title is, you know, elsewhere. But then again, it does take like eyeballs and whatnot away from that title, or like the idea or the build of people away from that title. Or you're saying, well, this is a consolation prize. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's tough to build up a belt that is in essence a, you know, de facto interim championship, in some ways. So again, like, you're doomed no matter what you do in some ways. You know what I mean? But now that that's over, you know what I mean? you're like, okay, well, we've got this secondary title. What are we going to do with it? Because we can't just forget about that we have this title, because then then it'll lose even more of value or whatever else. Not only that, but the decisions that we're making every week will lose things for the crowd, and lose things here and lose things there. Not only to mention that it's sort of a bad look for us, like we don't know what we're doing or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of other ways that you can say, oh, well, it doesn't look like you know what you're doing sometimes, or whatever. Or you take way too long to get to the point of, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, whatever. And getting people to be like, let's get there, let's go, whatever, and whatnot. So again, when you're saying, what are our future plans? Well, maybe you can't book too far into the future, obviously, but you've at least got to book 6 months down the road, or whatever. You've got to try to book weeks and months and even years sometimes down the road, at least saying, this is our general plan, because you've got to be flexible, because you never know, is Steve going to get injured? Is this person going to quit? Is this person gonna, retire? Is this is whatever? Is somebody's dog gonna die? Is somebody's grandma gonna die? Are they gonna start World War III? Are we gonna fall into a fascist dictatorship? Some of those things are legitimate right now in the US, very much so. So again, you don't know the outside world and what's going on, but again, you need to say, hey, how can we book for the next 6 months our little wrestling show? Because it never ends. So you need to know where we're going in 6 months. This is where we're going to be in 6 months. Okay, then let's, all right, go. Right. Next 6 months, or the next couple of months, or whatever it is. And then the next couple of months, or whatever it is. Again, saying, okay, this is where we want to be by this time. And this is where we want to be by that time, or this is what we want to be doing by that time. Because, again, even if you say, oh, well, are we going to be booking this wrestling show in the next year? Who knows? I don't know. But again, you've got to do the best with what you've got. You've got those 2 hours every week. You need to make these things, whatever it is. And yes, it does come down to whatever, the editors or whatever else it is get to put on TV sometimes, because again, it is what it is. You can't do anything about the timing of things or whatever else it is. And that's why, I think that they're more comfortable with the tapings, because it's much more easier to time things a bit more or whatever else it is, rather than, oh shit, we don't know when this is happening or when that's happening or whatever else it is. Once you know, oh yes, this is when this is happening, or that's when this happens, or what, your ad breaks, whatever else it is. So at least you can be in control of that. You can't be in control of everything, but you've got to be in control of saying, what time do we have? So that's and again, it is more expensive to go live. It is fraught with more challenges to go live than what it is to just tape a show. But when you tape a show, I mean, you can tape backstage stuff and pre-tape other stuff or whatever else it is. That's fine. But anything that's happening in front of the crowd really needs to be broadcast as live. You cannot have a taped show that anything that happens in front of the crowd be taped, because again, especially in today's age, and this is the thing, even NXT is taped every other week, I think it is. So again, it's well, if and WWE puts a lot of money behind AEW. it's their property, which I don't know. Like, maybe they could, like, Raw and SmackDown go live every week, and they have their PLEs. But I don't know why NXT is not live every week. But I think it's easier for them just to tape something and then be like, if spoilers get out, they get out. I don't know. To them. Because again, I don't know. But maybe it's because they're doing that's the least important show anyway. So it's not like if spoilers get out most of the time or whatever else it is that you're really that worried, like, or whatever. But then again, you are going up against AEW on Wednesdays, so I would think to say, hey, you need to pull your finger out and say, let's go live every Wednesday because we need to beat AEW definitively. We can't just be, like, getting our results out and people knowing the results and things like that or whatever. But anyway, same thing for TNA. Like, you can't have your results getting out there. If it's like 1 week before, even that's still like not ideal, but at least it's better than, it was 3 or 4 weeks ago or whatever else it was of saying, hey, this was taped 3 or 4 weeks ago. Oh man, that's awkward, because again, how are you going to, not have like spoilers from that? 100% you are. Like, people know the spoilers, they're out there. Like, I could go out there and read them. And I've said this before, maybe I will, but because it does help sometimes to know before we dive into some of these things, because and sometimes I miss things or whatever, but like, again, sometimes knowing, okay, this is where we're going, because at least then we can talk about it. Rather than being like, oh, wow, what a surprise, like type thing. They're not doing this thing this week or this month or whatever it is. Okay, so what's happening next month, or whatever it is, But by context, obviously, we know that. So, whatever. But still, yeah, guys, I think that you've always got to keep this thing rolling. Wrestling rolling. It's just, like, that's the thing. That's how wrestling lives. It's unlike any other show, like, in some ways. That's why, like, I say, like, MLW or any other show that is on for like a couple weeks, couple months, or what. And I can't remember what the other shows are, but like, I know that they used to do this and whatnot. But again, or they have a season or whatever it is. That's what I think it was. So they have like a dozen episodes or whatever. I don't know how many it is, whatever it is. I don't know. Okay? I don't watch it. I don't pay attention, and I don't really care. I'm just saying, in general, if you say, hey, we're on basically 52 weeks of the year, whatever else it is, every Thursday. That's it. Great. Okay, cool. And we're on this channel, that channel, this channel, that channel, whatever. Okay, cool. So people can tune in and see our show because they know where it is. It's going to be here every week for the next year at least, and for at least the next like 3 years in TNA's case. We know that for now. Like, and in 3 years, we've, like, especially this year, but especially probably the next 3 years, they've got to be, posting consistently. It has to be consistent. They have to see, hey, it really does, like, the live numbers are really better in general. Perhaps the first few were a bit shaky or whatever else it was. We weren't quite up with our footing and up with, like, doing a live broadcast with this sort of thing. So, yeah, it's a learning curve for everybody. That's fine. We, like TNA, they've done live shows, but they've been few and far between. You know what I mean? And again, saying, like, okay, what are we going to do for the future? What is this payoff for the future? You know what I mean? Because like some moments are cool moments in of themselves in a way, but like that's just a moment. Like, and moments mean something and are important, but like sometimes you have to wonder or have to think like, well, why do we need to do this? Like what or whatever. Like why do we need to have Dixie Carter and Billy Ray hug? Why do we need to do that? Besides like it's a moment in a way, you know. Um but again, like sometimes that's fine, but sometimes it's like, well, what's that leading to? Nothing. You know what I mean? Or nothing that benefits anybody or anything in the future, you know. So it becomes like, again, why did we do this? You know. So yeah, I just question those things of saying, well, what is the purpose, my man? Um, Look at guys like Matt Cardona and anyone like that. Okay, Matt, he wants to. I think he said he wants to win the title. I don't know whether he will, honestly. But like, what does it do for him to win it? Not a whole lot. But the thing is, that's not always the point. You know, even if you're making the numbers and meeting the requirements, so to speak, of saying, hey, look at LA Knight. I think he's been shafted a little bit because he's been making the numbers. But what, like, I think that they're of the mindset of like, well, what will it do for him or what will it do for us to kind of do that? Especially considering his age, you know, like, so maybe that's his bucket list item or whatever else it is. I don't know. But that's, you know, I don't know. He wants to continue to work for it. Good on him. But like, I don't think WWE is ever going to pull the trigger, so to speak. I don't know. Could be wrong. But again, you say, what would it really do for him? Maybe it'll do something for him. But what will it do for our roster in as a whole? You know, like, or our future plans as a whole. You know, we don't just want to give him this thing if it's like, yes, we put the belt on him and we made him up into being a main event level guy, but who else did it help? You know, or how else did it build somebody else or build up the product or build up the brand or whatever else it was? That's what we're looking for. We're looking for these guys that when they win the belt or when they come to win the belt, it's not just elevating them. That's why, so like, again, it's a prize to be held by the very best, by the very fewest of people, by the rarest of people, you know, by the people that absolutely will lift up the company, you know, and help the brand overall and help the roster overall and just, you know, move tickets, shift tickets, do all the things that we need to do, especially for TNA. Maybe not so much for WWE, but they're still like looking at that stuff and going, yeah, what will it do for us if we really pull the trigger on this? Or is it really there enough or whatever, you know? And you look at guys who like Jey Uso, who won the Royal Rumble, and it felt like when he won the title, hey, he is really the main event, you know, guy now. But like now he's just slipped back to the mid card. So it's like that. I don't know whether they lost faith. I think they, in some ways, they did. Whether they lost interest or whatever else it was, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. But again, it always feels like, well, what was that all for? You know what I mean? It didn't, that was an experiment that didn't pan out. And what was it calculated enough? I don't know. Or should you have said, hey, maybe it isn't working out, but now we've committed. You know, we've committed to this push, So we should commit to putting this person in that role in a way. But then again, like you can look at the same thing with Dolph Ziggler or Nick Nemeth in TNA. But then again, now recently he's been pushed back up to the main event scene. But, or somewhat to the main event scene. Should we do this? Shouldn't we do this? Why shouldn't we do this? All that sort of stuff. It's impossible sometimes to say, yes, this is what we should do, or it isn't what we should do. Should we take the gamble? Shouldn't we take the gamble? We can keep, sometimes it is good to go with the quote safe option, but it's sometimes you should roll the dice and say, okay, let's take a chance. Let's do something different. That's what they did with Jay. They said, let's take a chance. Let's roll the dice. Let's do something different. I think it's good when you do something different sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't pan out, or sometimes you're not committed enough to do it. But at that point, I think you've committed. So you're saying, hey, if we've made a bad choice, well, unfortunately, we've kind of committed to it. So let's keep committing to it until we can, and maybe you're oh, well, Jay is getting on in years or whatever else it is. So he's now looking to have a last big time run or whatever else it is, or whatnot, with his brother or as one of the best tag teams, period. Okay, great. So now treat them like they're the biggest deal. Don't treat them like, oh, they're here or whatever, treat them and give them a big time story. Put them in main events. Put them in there with some of the other bigger guys, the more main event level guys, with Cody, with Lesnar, with some of these other guys or whatever else it is. Something like that. I don't know exactly, but again, have them beat some of these other guys in other ways, or have them alongside some of these other guys. They can tag with Roman, they can tag with Cody, they can tag with whomever or whatever it is, against Gunther, or against this person, against Imperium, or against whoever, whatever it is. Again, give them those sorts of things to work with. So it's even if we've relegated him to a lower position in some ways, at least we're giving him and the team some more relevance and boosting them up, because again, we want to feel like we achieved something with it, and that will echo throughout the entire roster, and not just be something that was an experiment that didn't pan out or whatever else it was. So again, you've got to think okay, Nick Nemeth is one of our top guys right now, moving back to sort of TNA stuff. But that's not going to be the case for long, and it can't be the case for long. And you, obviously, as I said before, you can build guys like Santana, but he's already basically at that plateau where it's okay, we can't go much higher, realistically. So now it's time to say, okay, well, we need to build other guys that we can be who's the next person? Not just saying we're going to stay safe and we're going to have these other main event level, guys feed for Santana so that he keeps on track for a while or whatever else it is, until he's going to drop the belt at some point or whatever else it is. But then, who's going to win? Why are they going to win? How are they going to win? Why will people care or whatever? Because that's how you get people to be invested and to pay their money for that investment, to come and see your show, or to come and buy your pay-per-view, or to come and watch your weekly episodic TV, or whatever, or even just check out the highlights. Because if you have something that they go, oh shit, I've got to see this person ascend, then you've hooked them, you know? Because, like, even though they know eventually, or they might not know, but they might feel like, oh, they've done this for a reason to test them, or whatever else it is. So obviously, if I tag along in that and chant and cheer and tune in and buy the merch and whatever else it is, then they'll see, hey, you know, people are into this person. They do want to see more of them. Maybe they're not quite there yet, or whatever else it is. So maybe we'll circle back to them, you know, or whatever else it is. Or maybe we will culminate them here and now, because fans are ready for it. It's the time to do it. Whatever else it is, you know, this is why we did all this, or whatever it was, you know. I said with the the match that Moose and Cedric had on Impact, I think that the match that was had at Genesis was somewhat helped by the fact that there was another competitor there, because they could continue to have their match while Moose was out on the floor hurt. But in some ways, maybe it should have just been a one-on-one match. Like, I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't have changed the fact that Moose got hurt. But again, like, if Moose hadn't, like, you never know. It's the spider's web or whatever, or the butterfly effect or whatever. You know, like. But again, like what did Joe Hendry coming in accomplish besides, like, unless, you know, like, he was just happened to be there for reasons or whatever. I don't think that, like, fans were happy to see him and whatnot, but what did it really accomplish, especially for him to win? Like, he shouldn't have won, like, especially if he's not going to be here. Like, what was that for? What did that accomplish? What did that do for anybody? Nothing. You know, maybe you say, oh yes, it helped with this story or whatever. You know, that story was already there, and you could have already told it the way you wanted to anyway, by Cedric beating Moose, you know, in a one-on-one scenario, and then you wouldn't have had to have Moose in that match if he had have gotten hurt the next week, you know. And it would have meant more for it to be on pay-per-view than just, and wouldn't have taken, I don't know, however many minutes it was on TV for them to have that match. They wouldn't have had to have that match. So just because Joe Hendry was gonna be there, and you had something, you had an idea to do something with him, like, doesn't mean you should have put him in this match. Maybe you should have put him in and done something else with him, or he should have just appeared and said hello to, or said whatever, and wandered off, or whatever else it was, you know, or done comment. I don't know what he would have done. It wouldn't have mattered what he'd done besides, like, being in this match. But again, it didn't really help anyone in TNA, you know, or didn't really help TNA. So it's like, well, why do it? Like, especially if he's going to win. If he's going to lose or whatever, okay, cool, that's a bit different. But he didn't, and it really didn't help anything. So, and I just think, like, the match would have been better off, like, between just Cedric and Moose, and then you wouldn't have had to do, like, the rematch between Cedric and Moose on TV. Maybe it doesn't make as much sense because it was all part of the same night of shenanigans and whatnot. But then again, you could have still had, like, something go on, and then you have, you know, some more time for something else, I think. So maybe it was a little bit of wasted time, I think. So that's what I mean. Like, we should have looked a little bit deeper into some of these things and realized, what does this achieve? Because like the ball again has to keep rolling, but what does this achieve? It doesn't achieve anything more than what we've already got. And if we have to say, oh, well, we're going to have another match between these two tomorrow night, well, wait a minute, why not just have that match tonight, and then, later down the road, whatever's going to happen, so we're going to wait and see. Like, now you start to feel like, hey, now that Cedric's heel, and maybe hopefully, like, he's got a big win against Moose, in some ways, now you're starting to say maybe he is a threat to the X Division title. He needs more wins, I think, than this. And you need to position him like an X Division threat. Because Leon's already beaten him, it's already like, there's a little bit there like, oh, well, we've seen this before, and that's where I was saying, hey, we've done this dance, you need to change it up. You can't just have, like, when they added it to being a triple threat, it was like, oh, okay, cool. This is going to be a triple threat. That is different, that is something extra that you've added, a wrinkle or whatever else it was. I don't know whether you should have done that, though. Maybe it should have just been, Cedric and or should have just been Moose or whatever. I don't know. But the fact that you had them already in that match actually would have helped them to be just in a singles match on that night. So, yeah, transitioning away and then saying, oh, well, this is what happens the next night. Moose shakes Cedric's hand at some point early in the night, saying, oh, we had a great match there. You were the better man, but I'm going to get you next time, or whatever else it is, or something like that. A couple minutes worth of promo, maybe. Versus like or maybe even a minute or whatever of promo or whatever else it is, versus like a 10-15 minute match where he was like, injured or working with an injured back. Was like, well, that's not a great thing for him, and it's not great for the rest of the roster because, again, maybe it's a great opener or whatever else it is, but you can have many other great openers. So why you need to do that? Like, again, step back and say, oh, wait, why do we need to do that? We should have just done that at Genesis. Made more time here, and then gone from there, with the new system and Moose getting kicked out and all of this. Now that's revealed that Cedric's, part of the new system and yada yada. And then you do the same thing. Like, I think it would have worked basically the same, except you wouldn't have had that match. It was a great match, but again, it could have been on pay-per-view. And then maybe Moose doesn't get as injured or whatever. But maybe that was like why they decided to put Cedric in there. I don't know. Maybe that was like a last minute decision because Moose is injured. Well, we can't rely on Moose being here or doing things that much because he's injured, So I don't know. But yeah, again, I think that perhaps should have been well known because he was dealing with issues for a while. So, but anyway, guys, yeah, I do think, when you say it's always thinking future, 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 but everything happens like in the present, what I mean? We're only living now, or whatever, so we can only speculate and try to predict just using that, wrestling knowledge that we have, or the basic paramounts of like storytelling and drama. It's always about the hero's story or the redemption of the villain or whatever else it is, and those sorts of things. Those not tropes, but those things that are, somewhat classic in storytelling. And absolutely in wrestling storytelling. And I know you guys are very smart and know all this, but I'm obsessed and I need to talk about it. And it's really helpful for those people, the handful of people that don't know about this sort of stuff and don't think about this stuff and that sort of thing, that go, oh yeah, okay, so we are here and we are, we can't really tell. Like, if I was a booker, of course I wouldn't tell everyone, hey, in 6 months this is what I'm going to book. Why would I tell people that? You've got to kind of show people, hey, these are the threads that I'm weaving or whatever. Maybe I'm going this way. Maybe I'm going that way. Maybe I'm doing this. Maybe I'm giving this person a chance. Oh, wow, okay, they really showcased themselves, or the fans really reacted well to them. Okay, cool. Might put the belt on them now because their merch is, moving, and our fans still invested. That's sometimes what you're looking for, or what you're hoping for, or whatever, of saying, hey, did they tune out on us? Because that's the thing. Like, people can say, oh, TNA did a bad thing here by not putting the belt on Santana, or they did a bad thing there by not putting the belt on Hendry, or whatever else it was. But were people still tuning in? Were still people, turning up to the venues? Were people still invested? Were people still waving their flags and chanting? Yes. So whether it was a success or a failure, or wasn't executed the best, or whatever else it was, well, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we got to the point where we are now, so it all doesn't matter, because week to week, month to month, everyone was still coming to these shows, everyone was still tuning into these shows, everyone was still buying tickets, everyone was still buying merch, everyone was still buying popcorn and drinks and whatever else it was, to all these events that happened over that time, where people were saying, oh, that was a stupid idea, should have just put the belt on him, or whatever. But they were passionate about Santana, and they wanted to see him win. So that's what drove him to winning, because it was like people wanted to see him win. And I think it is one of these things of the state of the internet and whatnot, where everyone has to complain or whatever else it is. It's not just me coming on here to complain or to say, whatever else it is. I don't think this worked or whatever else it was. But then again, I'm trying to analyze to say, oh, well, I understand why they kind of did that. Because again, wrestling is about, like, unsureties or whatever else it is, and keeping people fresh and whatnot in people's minds, or keeping them wanting more, not going, oh, we're sick of this Santana guy, or whatever else it is, or whoever it is, starting to sour on them, or, just doing the same old thing. It's like, well, we've got to change it up. So yes, while people can debate or complain or whatever about whether, the decisions were correct, or whatever. And I see this on Twitter and whatnot, and Facebook and things like that, where they've done something, like, mostly in WWE, honestly. But again, where people just say right decision or wrong decision. And I'm like, for frick's sake, let it play out for more than 5 seconds to realize whether this is, the right decision or the wrong decision. There are obvious decisions that you go, well, is that the right decision or the wrong decision? And people initially go, oh no, that's the wrong decision. This would have been the right decision. But at the end of the day, whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision, we're still in business, baby. That's the ultimate thing. People still cared. So, or cared more in some ways, because they felt like, perhaps they weren't listened to, or whatever else it was. I don't know. But again, they felt like, hey, we've got to make sure Santana gets that belt. So they were even more invested, which is what the bookers kind of wanted to see, that people were still invested in, and even more invested to an extent. So again, they wouldn't let that go. They said, okay, they are invested, no matter And that's why sometimes, yes, you've got to ignore the online chatter. I don't think that you have to ignore it completely. You have to take it with perhaps a pinch of salt, because again, like, if people are in the arenas and are chanting and are buying tickets and all that sort of stuff, or are buying pay-per-views or whatever else it is, then hey, we know what we've got in our hands. We know where we're going. It's just getting there now. So again, let's get there, now. Because, like, at least, like, if you say, oh, well, what if they weren't interested? Well, that's not what happened, and I don't know why exactly, because people could have, but then again, like you could say with Cody, WWE didn't pull the trigger at WrestleMania 39. They pulled it at 40. And they almost didn't pull it at 40. They said, oh, maybe we'll do it at SummerSlam or whatever else it is. And The Rock will main event WrestleMania. But then the fans were like, no, Cody's got to main event WrestleMania. Why did you have him win the Royal Rumble if he, it's something that's never been done before, but maybe that's kind of a cool idea in some ways. But again, it's like, well, no, we don't want to see this nepotism angle play out. If The Rock was going to challenge Cody or challenge Roman, then he should have been in the Rumble. He should have won, and he should have gone to main event. Now, would people have accepted that? I don't know, and I don't think they would have, because everyone was so behind Cody. And maybe again, like, I think The Rock probably couldn't do this, but you should have had like a match where it was like, maybe you should have done the Bret Hart Lex Luger spot kind of thing, where it's like they both eliminated each other basically at the same time with The Rock and Cody, and then be like, okay, well, whoever wins an upcoming match at whatever show is going to be the one to face Roman or whatever. I don't know. Or I don't know, the Rock convinces Cody, hey, I know we both went out at the same time, blah blah blah. But this is why I want to face Roman. I have many reasons why I want to face Roman. And you're going to go out there and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to give up my shot at Roman for now. I think it would have been the same thing, honestly. But I think it would be more interesting in some ways, because at least then he's like a participant. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. Just my thoughts on how the ball has to roll. We can only be living now and understanding the stories now. Of course, like the same thing for, the bookers. They can only be understanding this. They can understand the full story of what they're trying to tell now, or whatever they're doing now, into the next, few months or whatever it is. But they won't know a storyline that's in another year or another 2 years or whatever else it is, because like they haven't planned that far ahead. But again, when they come to the point of saying, okay, every story like that we've just about had and worked on for the last like 6 months, the last 8 months, whatever it is, has basically just about come to an end, or whatever else it is, or whenever you're deciding to say, okay, we're going to book for the next 6 months, next 8 months, whatever it is, next year, whatever. So now we've got to book those things in. Not taking, like, and that's the thing, like, when you book things, it's not like they should be 100% set in stone. They should be penciled in. Because, if they're immediate, then it's like, yes, that's more clear, this is definitely what we're going to do, or at least hopefully what we're going to do, barring injuries, barring, people having their visas revoked or whatever else it is, and all that other stuff that happens out there. But barring those things, this is what we're going to do next month. Okay, cool. And this is how we're getting there. Okay, cool. Great. And not only that, this is why we're doing this for the next, couple of weeks, because again, in the next 3 months, we want to build this person and we want to put them in this position. Or we want to build that person in this position. We want to build that, this is the layering of multiple different stories in multiple different divisions that you need for a modern wrestling company. You can't just, yes, you've got your major star in Mike Santana, absolutely. But you can't just say, oh, well, the rest will write itself or whatever, or the rest will just happen. No. You need to say, okay, where are we going? Why are we going? Etc. all the time. And that's the difficulty of writing sometimes, or booking stories, or booking angles, or whatever. It is such a grind. You've got to have such a big passion for this sport, and say, what if I was booking this show, what would I want to see, or what would the crowd want to see, so that we can entertain them, and so that we can build some people and give them things to, not just matches, but promos and moments and things that will keep them coming back, keep them happy, but also keep them invested. Those are the things that, and be like, let's be more invested in this person. Let's be more invested in that person. Like, now is Leon, potentially going to be world champion level material? Who knows? You never know. So again, there's always a chance for anything and everything. So yeah, I love to look at it, and I love to think about it. I think we all do. So we've got to remember that, we're all in this together in a way, no matter our differences of opinion. And I don't want to get into politics or anything like that with people. So if you have a different set of beliefs or whatever, we probably can't be close friends or anything else like that, because again, I think that is a deal breaker in some ways. We might meet each other, we might talk about wrestling, our shared interests, and we might have differing opinions there, and we could agree to disagree there or whatever. But yeah, everything else, perhaps not. Perhaps we can agree to disagree in a way, but we won't really interact more in that regard, because we won't have anything in common. But whatever. It is what it is. Anyway, guys, enough rambling. I hope you have enjoyed this one, and I hope you join me again in another one.